Today, I've been thinking about the fact that I think we're a lot more in control of how we feel on a day to day basis than maybe we originally think. And I think all of that starts with what you're consuming on a regular basis. You know, our parents used to say, like, you are what you eat. And I think that can be applied to things that aren't just food. Like, I think we become a product of what we're always around, whether that's like the music you're listening to or the thoughts that you're entertaining. Maybe it's the people you're around. All of that's shaping your mood and also your outlook on life. I think our brains and our moods are shaped by what we're repeatedly interacting with. So if you're repeatedly making choices that you know are making you feel worse, well, like, of course you're not going to feel good. So I do want to say that there's obvious things that maybe impact how you feel that are outside of your control. You know, things like depression or the way people treat you or just really hard life situations that are out of your hands. And this isn't me saying you can just like fix everything by changing your habits. I don't think that. But I do think that there are these smaller, like everyday choices that are within your control. And I think those things can either support you or make you feel a lot worse. And I've been thinking about this because lately I've just kind of been taking some inventory of my own life, and I've been realizing that like there's a pattern of, you know, when I feel off, it's usually not random. It's usually a reflection of what I have been consuming. And I think that how we treat ourselves is a choice, and continuing to participate in like friendships or negative self-talk or whatever bad habit it is that you're prone to, that's something that's going to keep you stuck and it's going to keep you feeling miserable. So if you're feeling off, I think the first step is to think critically about what choices you're making and how they're making you feel. I've been noticing this more and more, especially in small, kind of like obvious ways I used to ignore, like music, for example. When I was in graduate school, it was a time in my life where I just felt sad a lot. I was pretty isolated. I didn't have any balance in my life. I was constantly doing schoolwork. My classmates weren't the nicest. And during this era, I was always listening to sad music, always. And I think there's something to be said about like feeling validated by the lyrics of sad music or like maybe listening to it if you need a good cry. But for me personally, listening to sad music all the time just made me way sadder. And it was this like horrible loop of like being sad, listening to sad music, and just sort of wallowing in it. Anyway, my point is that I think music just reinforces the emotional states that we find ourselves in. So it's important to be intentional about what you're choosing to listen to and what moods you're choosing to reinforce. And I think the same idea that we are what we consume applies to media and news sometimes too. I obviously think it's important to be informed and aware of what's going on in the world. That's always going to be important, but there's definitely a point where it stops being helpful and just starts making you feel like anxious or overwhelmed or maybe kind of helpless. And I've noticed that in myself, like if I'm constantly consuming negative news or just like scrolling through things that are making me feel bad, it's not a good thing for me. And I think it's all about finding balance, you know, of being aware, but also paying attention to when it's too much and giving yourself permission to just set some limits and notice what is making you feel worse. And then probably the biggest one for me has been people, because I think that the people that you surround yourself with, that's something you're consuming too. Their energy, their mindset, the way that they're thinking about life, all of it's rubbing off on you in ways that maybe you're not realizing in the moment. I had this friendship at one point where the culture of our relationship was basically just like complaining about everything. We would hang out and somehow we'd always end up just like talking about everything going wrong in our lives. And to be honest, like I don't blame it all on this friend. Like I was probably feeding into that at the time. But I just started realizing that every time we hung out, I just left feeling worse, you know, more negative, more stuck, just not like the person that I wanted to be. And it kind of forced me to like take a step back and evaluate the way that I was behaving, evaluate what I was doing in the relationship, and just kind of ask myself if this dynamic was something that was like adding anything positive to my life. And I ended up needing to create a little bit of distance there, which was hard, but like definitely needed and definitely something that I don't regret, because I really do think that energy is contagious. If you're constantly around negativity, it's going to affect you. It's going to make you feel negative, whether you mean for it to or not. And I acknowledge that hard things come up and we're not always going to be positive all the time. And it's part of relationships to go through phases of like ups and downs where maybe someone's going through a harder time and is a little bit more negative. But I think just look at the overall patterns of like, you know, even when things are good, even when things are back to like normal in their life, how are they acting? What's their outlook on life and how's that affecting you? Because feeling sad sometimes, or like feeling down, or not always feeling hopeful is so normal, but it's not normal to feel like that constantly. So those were just some examples of ways you can evaluate what you're engaging with and how it's affecting you. I think you can apply that to like a lot of different things in life, not just these three examples. I think it's really important to remember that life isn't just what happens to you, it's a compilation of all the small choices you're making for yourself every single day. And the good thing about that is that it means you have a lot more control of it than you might think right now. So don't feel like you have to change everything overnight, but just start being more aware. And I think you'll feel really surprised at what you find out.